Have you ever bought ginger from the market, placed a piece in a pot, and then just watched it sit there, doing nothing for months? Perhaps it rotted, or maybe it sprouted a little before giving up. You're not alone. Growing ginger can be perplexing for many, and it often boils down to two common issues: selecting the wrong variety or starting with a subpar rhizome. In this video, I'll guide you through everything you need to cultivate ginger successfully, from picking the ideal type for your garden to harvesting plump, beautiful rhizomes by season's end. Stick around until the conclusion, as I'll reveal a straightforward method to sustain your ginger harvest year after year, eliminating the need to purchase new rhizomes again. Let's get started. Ginger is one of the most rewarding crops you can cultivate in your garden. There's truly nothing like pulling fresh ginger from the soil and using it in your kitchen the very same day. Its flavor is far more vibrant and aromatic than anything you'll find at the store. And the good news is, ginger is considerably easier to grow than most people imagine, once you grasp a few fundamental principles. So, let's begin by understanding what ginger truly needs to thrive. Before we dive into planting, I want to ensure you have a basic understanding of how ginger grows, as this will make everything else fall into place. Ginger is a tropical plant that develops from an underground rhizome, that knobby, root-like structure you see in markets. It's not actually a root, but a modified stem that grows horizontally beneath the soil, storing energy for the plant. From this rhizome, shoots emerge, reaching upwards to form tall, leafy stalks that can grow between 90 centimeters and 120 centimeters in height. The plant utilizes these leaves to capture energy from the sun, and all that gathered energy is stored back in the rhizome, which is the part we harvest and consume. The key takeaway is this: ginger requires a long, warm growing season. We're talking about 8 to 10 months free of frost to yield a substantial harvest. This means if you reside in tropical or subtropical climates, you can grow ginger outdoors year-round with relative ease. However, even if you're in temperate or colder regions, it's entirely possible to cultivate ginger. You'll just need to start it indoors earlier, grow it in containers that can be moved, or treat it as an annual crop, harvesting it before the first frost. I've been successfully growing ginger for years in a temperate climate, and I'm going to show you exactly how I do it. Now, let's address the most crucial decision you'll make: selecting the correct ginger variety to grow. This is where many gardeners stumble right from the start. When most people think of ginger, they envision the common ginger found in grocery stores. This is Zingiber officinale, the culinary ginger, the kind we use in cooking. But within this species, there are numerous distinct varieties, and not all are equally suited for the home gardener. Furthermore, there are other types of ginger, such as galangal, turmeric, and various ornamental gingers. Today, however, I'm focusing specifically on culinary ginger, as that's what most of you are interested in growing for your kitchens. The ginger you typically find in supermarkets is usually Chinese ginger, sometimes referred to as yellow ginger. It's commercially grown because it produces large rhizomes and travels well. But here's the snag: commercial ginger is often treated with growth inhibitors to prevent sprouting on store shelves. This is why, when you try to plant it, it just sits there dormant. Even when it eventually sprouts, Chinese ginger tends to be more fibrous and less flavorful than other varieties. It was developed for yield and durability, not for taste or ease of cultivation in home gardens. The variety I highly recommend for home gardeners, and the one I personally grow, is called baby ginger, also known as young ginger or spring ginger. But let me clarify something, as this often causes confusion. Baby ginger isn't actually a different variety. It's common ginger harvested early, before the skin hardens and the flesh becomes fibrous. Any ginger variety can be harvested as baby ginger simply by picking it young. This matters because baby ginger is milder, juicier, and much less fibrous than mature ginger, making it ideal for home use. However, If you're aiming for the most flavorful ginger with minimal effort, the variety I truly endorse is called Hawaiian ginger, sometimes marketed as edible ginger or simply planting ginger by specialty suppliers. Hawaiian ginger has been selectively bred over generations for its flavor and performance in home gardens. It tends to sprout faster, grow more vigorously, and produce rhizomes with an excellent taste, spicy but not overpowering, with floral notes you simply won't find in supermarket ginger. Another variety worth mentioning is called Bubba Blue. This one is prized for its bluish-tinged skin and exceptionally aromatic flavor. It's a bit harder to source, but if you can find it, it's well worth the effort to cultivate. I've been growing Bubba Blue for 3 seasons, and I can attest that the flavor is exceptional. It possesses more complexity than common ginger, with an almost citrusy undertone. You might also encounter something called galangal, which looks similar to ginger and is used in Thai cuisine. Galangal is an entirely different plant. It belongs to the same family, but has a sharper, more resinous flavor and is used differently in cooking. If you enjoy Thai food, galangal is worth growing, but it won't substitute for common ginger. So to summarize my variety recommendations, if you desire the best results with the least amount of work, look for Hawaiian ginger or planting ginger from a reputable nursery. If you're seeking something special, give Bubba Blue a try. And if you must use supermarket ginger, opt for organic at the very least, as it's less likely to have been treated with growth inhibitors. Now that you're clear on which variety to grow, let's discuss where to acquire your ginger rhizomes, as this is just as critical as choosing the right variety. The number one mistake gardeners make is grabbing ginger from the supermarket and expecting it to grow. As I've mentioned, most commercial ginger is treated with growth inhibitors. Even organic varieties have often been stored in cold conditions for so long that they become dormant or lose their viability. You can try, and sometimes it works, but your success rate will be significantly lower. What I strongly recommend is purchasing planting ginger from a trusted nursery or online supplier. When you buy planting ginger, you're getting rhizomes that have been specifically cultivated and stored for planting. They haven't been treated with inhibitors, they've been kept in suitable conditions, and they're ready to grow. Some excellent sources I've utilized over the years include nurseries specializing in tropical plants, online vendors focusing on edible plants, and occasionally spring plant fairs or farmers markets. When selecting rhizomes, whether buying them or sifting through a bin at a nursery, here's what to look for. You want firm, plump rhizomes that feel heavy for their size. The skin should be smooth and taut, not wrinkled or shriveled. Look for visible growth buds, those small dots or eyes on the surface. This is where new shoots will emerge. The more eyes you see, the more sprouts you'll get. Avoid any rhizome that feels soft, mushy, moldy, or dried out. A healthy ginger rhizome should have a fresh, aromatic scent when you lightly scratch the skin. One more tip on sourcing. If you know someone who grows ginger, ask if you can take a few pieces from their harvest. Ginger that has been locally grown and recently harvested is often the most vigorous for replanting. I save pieces from my own harvest every year to replant the following season, and this homegrown ginger consistently outperforms any ginger I purchase. Alright, we're now heading into the exciting part. You've selected your ginger variety, you have your rhizomes, and now it's time to get them into the ground or into a container, which is actually how I prefer to grow ginger, and I'll explain why. Ginger thrives in loose, rich, well-draining soil. Heavy clay soil is problematic because ginger rhizomes will rot if they sit in waterlogged conditions. Sandy soil drains too quickly and doesn't retain enough moisture or nutrients. What you're aiming for is something in between. Good, light, enriched soil with plenty of compost. If your garden soil isn't ideal, this is a major reason to consider containers. You have complete control over your potting mix. For containers, I use a blend of about 60% good quality potting mix and 40% compost. Some gardeners add a bit of perlite for extra drainage, which also works well. The container itself should be wide and shallow, not tall and narrow, because ginger rhizomes spread horizontally. A pot at least 12 inches deep and 18 inches wide is a good starting point for 2 or 3 rhizome pieces. You can go larger if you desire a bigger harvest. If planting directly in the ground, choose a location that receives partial shade. Ginger doesn't appreciate full, direct sun all day. In its natural habitat, it grows on the forest floor beneath the canopy of larger trees. Dappled light or morning sun with afternoon shade is ideal. Too much direct sun, especially in warmer climates, will scorch the leaves and stress the plant. Before planting, I like to soak my rhizomes overnight in room temperature water. This helps to awaken them and rehydrate them if they've dried out during storage. Some gardeners soak them in a diluted seaweed extract solution for an extra boost. I've had good results with that as well. Now here's how to plant. If the rhizome is large, you can cut it into pieces, with each piece having at least 2 or 3 growth buds. Allow the cut pieces to air dry for a day or two so the cuts can callus over. This helps prevent rot. Plant each piece about 2 inches deep, with the eyes facing upwards. If planting multiple pieces, space them about 8 inches apart to give them room to spread. Water the soil thoroughly after planting. Then, ease up and keep it only lightly moist until you see green shoots emerge. Overwatering before the plant is actively growing is one of the quickest ways to rot your rhizomes. Once shoots appear, which usually takes 2 to 4 weeks depending on the temperature, you can begin watering more regularly. By the way, if you're finding this information helpful, please consider subscribing so you don't miss out on future videos, right? Let's continue. Now let's talk about the growing conditions ginger needs once it's actively growing. Temperature is paramount. Ginger loves warmth. The ideal growing temperature range is between 75 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit. Growth significantly slows below 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and anything below 50 degrees Fahrenheit can damage the plant. This is why ginger does so well as a summer crop, even in cooler climates. As long as you have warm summers, your ginger will grow. Just be sure to start it indoors if your last frost date is late. I start my ginger indoors in late August or early September. This is for those in the southern hemisphere, about 8 to 10 weeks before the last frost. I use a heat mat set to around 75 degrees Fahrenheit to keep the soil warm, and this really speeds up germination. Once the weather warms up and nighttime temperatures are consistently above 55 degrees Fahrenheit, I move my containers outdoors to a shaded spot on my porch. Humidity is another factor that matters more than most people realize. Ginger hails from tropical regions with high humidity, so it appreciates moisture in the air. If you're growing indoors or in a dry climate, misting the leaves occasionally can help. Outdoors, this is generally less of an issue, especially if you're growing in partial shade where the air tends to remain a bit more humid. Watering is all about balance. Ginger likes consistently moist soil, but not waterlogged. I water my containers when the top inch of soil feels dry. During hot summer months, this might mean watering every other day. Cooler or overcast weather might call for once or twice a week. The secret is to never let the soil completely dry out, but also never let it become waterlogged. If you're growing in the ground and have heavy soil, consider creating a raised bed to improve drainage. One thing I've learned over the years is to mulch heavily around my ginger plants. I use about 3 to 4 inches of straw or shredded leaves. This does several important things. It keeps the soil moist, so you don't have to water as often. It keeps the roots cool during heat waves, and it adds organic matter to the soil as it breaks down. Ginger responds exceptionally well to a thick layer of mulch, and I've noticed much larger harvests in the years I'm generous with it. Now, let's discuss feeding, because ginger is a fairly hungry plant and needs consistent nutrition throughout the growing season to produce large rhizomes. I feed my ginger every 2 to 3 weeks during the active growing season, basically from when the shoots emerge until late summer. For fertilizer, I use a balanced organic fertilizer or one that's slightly higher in phosphorus. You want something in the range of a 5-5-5 or 4-6-4 ratio. Phosphorus supports root and rhizome development, which is exactly what we're after. I also like to do a compost top dressing once or twice during the season. In midsummer, I'll pull back the mulch, add a layer of fresh compost around the base of the plants, and then replace the mulch on top. This gives the plants a slow-release nutrient boost and keeps the soil biology active and healthy. One thing to avoid is over-fertilizing with nitrogen. Nitrogen promotes leafy green growth, which is great for the top part of the plants. But too much nitrogen means all that energy goes into the leaves instead of the rhizomes. You'll end up with a beautiful, lush plant, but a disappointing harvest. So, stick with balanced fertilizers and don't overdo it. If you notice your ginger leaves starting to yellow, but you're watering correctly, this is often a sign of nutrient deficiency. Give the plant a dose of liquid fertilizer and see if it improves within the next week or two. I like fish emulsion or liquid seaweed extract for a quick nutrient boost. As your ginger grows through the summer, you really don't need to do much pruning or maintenance. The plant pretty much takes care of itself. Just keep up with the watering, feeding, and that layer of mulch. If you see any dead or yellowing leaves at the base of the plant, you can remove them to keep things tidy, but it's not strictly necessary. One more tip on ongoing care. If you're growing ginger in containers and experience a period of very intense heat, say above 95 degrees Fahrenheit, I'll move my containers to a shadier location. Extreme heat can stress the plants and slow down growth. The beauty of containers is that you have that flexibility to move them as conditions change. Let's talk about some common problems you might encounter and how to address them. Because even though ginger is relatively trouble-free, a few issues can arise. First, if your rhizomes aren't sprouting, there are a few likely causes. The most common is that the soil is too cold. Ginger needs soil temperatures of at least 70 degrees Fahrenheit to reliably sprout. If you planted too early in cool soil, the rhizomes may be sitting there waiting for warmth, or they may have rotted. The other possibility is that you got rhizomes that were treated with growth inhibitors, or that lost their viability due to improper storage. If nothing sprouts after 6 weeks and the soil is warm, dig up a rhizome and check it. If it's soft or smells bad, it's rotted, and you'll need to start over with fresh rhizomes. Second, if you see leaves yellowing, it could be a few different things. Overwatering is a common culprit. Check the soil moisture. If it feels waterlogged, ease up on watering and ensure your drainage is adequate. Underwatering can also cause yellowing, especially if the leaf edges are turning brown and crispy. Nutrient deficiency, as I mentioned earlier, is another possibility. So, give the plant a dose of fertilizer and see if it perks up. Lastly, some yellowing of the lower leaves is completely normal as the plant matures, especially towards the end of the season. So don't panic if you see a few yellow leaves here and there. Third, if your ginger leaves have brown, burnt tips, this is almost always a sign of too much direct sun or insufficient watering. Move the plant to a shadier spot if possible, and make sure you're watering consistently. Remember, ginger is a forest floor plant that evolved in dappled shade, not in harsh sun. Fourth, root rot is a real concern with ginger and is almost always caused by overwatering or poor drainage. If you notice the plant wilting even though the soil is moist, or if you detect a foul smell coming from the soil, root rot could be the issue. At this point, your best bet is to carefully excavate the plant, trim away any rotted parts of the rhizome, let the healthy parts dry and callus for a day, and then replant in fresh, well-draining soil. Prevent this by never letting your ginger sit in waterlogged conditions. Fifth, pests are generally not a major problem with ginger, but you might occasionally see aphids, spider mites, or fungus gnats. Aphids and spider mites can be dislodged with a strong blast of water or treated with insecticidal soap if the infestation is severe. Fungus gnats usually appear when the soil surface stays too wet. Let the top inch of soil dry out a bit between waterings, and they'll go away on their own. In my experience, healthy ginger plants grown in good conditions rarely have serious pest issues. The good news is, if you follow the steps we've covered, from selecting good rhizomes to providing proper growing conditions, you should be able to avoid most of these problems. Ginger is truly a low-maintenance crop once it's established. Now let's get to the reward: harvesting your ginger. This is the moment you've been waiting for all season. Ginger is ready to harvest when the foliage begins to yellow and die back naturally, which typically occurs in late summer or fall, about 8 to 10 months after planting. For me, in a temperate climate, this is usually around April or May. When you see those leaves starting to wither and the stalks begin to dry, it's the plant's way of telling you it's finished putting energy into the rhizomes. Here's the thing: you actually have two options for harvesting, depending on what you're after. For those who prefer young ginger, that tender, juicy, and mild variety with a thin skin, you can begin harvesting as soon as 4 to 6 months after planting. Simply excavate carefully around the plant's perimeter and break off a small section of rhizome. The plant will continue to flourish, allowing you to gather a portion at a time throughout the growing season. While young ginger doesn't store as long as mature ginger, its flavor is extraordinary, and its texture is far more pleasant, lacking any tough fibers. If your goal is mature ginger for extended storage or a more substantial yield, wait until the plant has completely died back. At that point, you can unearth the entire clump. For container-grown ginger, this process is straightforward. I simply invert the entire pot onto a tarp and sift through the potting mix to locate all the rhizomes. For in-ground plantings, employ a garden fork and carefully dig from the outer edges inward to avoid damaging the rhizomes. When you extract a healthy ginger plant, you'll be astonished by how many rhizomes have multiplied. A single piece planted in the spring can transform into a mound weighing kilograms or more by autumn. It's a profoundly rewarding harvest, believe me. After gathering your crop, brush off any loose soil, but refrain from washing the rhizomes if you intend to store them. Moisture encourages mold. Allow them to air dry in a shaded, well-ventilated area for several days. Then, you can keep mature ginger in a cool, dark place for several weeks. For longer preservation, consider freezing whole or grated ginger, or drying and grinding it into powder. Remember to set aside some of your finest and healthiest rhizomes for replanting in the subsequent season. This brings me to a bonus tip. Now, that bonus tip I promised at the outset, something that has saved me money and yielded superior results year after year. Instead of purchasing new ginger rhizomes each spring, you can overwinter your existing ginger and maintain it indefinitely. Here's precisely how I manage it. Following the autumn harvest, I select 3 or 4 of my most robust rhizomes, those bearing numerous healthy growth buds. I do not wash them. Instead, I let them dry for a few days and then store them in a paper bag filled with lightly damp peat or cocoa coir. I place this bag in a cool, dark spot in my home where the temperature hovers between 10 and 15 degrees Celsius. An unheated basement or closet serves the purpose well. Inspect your stored rhizomes once a month. They should remain firm and plump. If the storage medium appears dry, lightly mist it with water. Should any rhizome begin to soften or develop mold, remove it immediately to prevent spoilage of the others. Towards the end of winter, around August, retrieve your stored rhizomes and place them in a warm location to initiate the planting process anew. Because these rhizomes originate from your own garden, they are already acclimatized to your specific conditions and tend to sprout more quickly and grow more vigorously than purchased ginger. I've been doing this for 5 years now and haven't bought ginger rhizomes since that initial season. My plants only improve with each passing year. It is incredibly gratifying to have a self-sustaining supply of fresh ginger right in your own backyard. So there you have it, all you need to know about growing ginger at home, from selecting the optimal variety to harvesting and preserving rhizomes for the year ahead. If you found this information valuable, please remember to subscribe and activate the notification bell so you don't miss my upcoming videos. And if you have any questions or wish to share your own ginger growing tips, feel free to leave them in the comments section. I truly enjoy hearing from you all. Thank you so much for watching. Cultivating your own ginger is one of those endeavors that might seem a bit exotic and special, but once you experience it, you'll wonder why you didn't start sooner. Obtain good rhizomes, provide them with warmth, shade, and water, and before you know it, you'll have more fresh ginger than you know what to do with. Happy planting, and I'll see you in the next video.